It's your boy, Remoy George Phillip, the first.
And I'm Samantha Nzesi Kifler.
This is Masculinity.
The show that investigates the performance of masculinity in the world today. And you know we spell it with a hard K.
So, Samantha.
Yes, Remoy?
Question for you.
Wait, am I today's guest? Oh my God, you should have told me. I am that special.
Well, maybe. But first, wondering, have you ever shot a gun?
Not yet, but I need to learn, I think. You never know.
Okay, we'll follow up. Do you know a lot of folks who do or who have?
Yeah, actually, I happen to know several gun owners.
Okay, that's good to know. How many of them are women, would you say?
Oh, interesting. I think only one of those. I think probably 10 gun owners and maybe two. But yeah, not many.
Okay, so that's a little bit of a different. Why do you think there's that disparity?
I don't think there's really just one answer, but I do think that safety plays a huge part. Like for me, I now want to learn how to shoot a gun and everything, but I was scared because there's so many gun accidents, gun-related accidental deaths. And also I was a little weird because I tapped into my anger recently and I was worried that I would, like shooting too much, that I was let me back away from the guns. I don't need to fight nobody with a gun. So I don't know, maybe some of my other co-conspirators feel the same way.
Okay, well, interesting. Yeah, uh-huh.
I can see where this is going. Is this another Women Warriors episode? Women with guns, so to speak?
Yo, get out of my brain, dog. Relax.
I think you love it. In fact, I know you.
Me? The word love? Wow. Do you know me?
Oh.
It's your boy, Remoy George Phillip the first. Come on,
the growth. But honestly, though, I do think we need to be careful with the subject matter.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
Well, it's not like our country isn't rife with gun violence, literally almost every day, actually.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
It's a little wild.
Yeah, you're not wrong. But actually, I think our guest today can guide us through this history and help us make sense of some of it and how it affects us today.
Well, I know you love your history, Remoy.
I do.
But I think in this case, let me say her story.
Hey, Kellie Carter Jackson is a herstory professor, history professor as well, in the Department of Africana Studies at Wellesley College, whose latest book and continued work deserves to be read by all. Kellie, welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Well, to get ahead of Samantha's trepidation, what are we talking about on the show today, and why is it important?
Today, I'm really excited because we're talking about, I would say, one of my favorite historical actors. We're talking about Mabel Williams. And Mabel Williams is a civil rights leader. She hails from the great state of North Carolina, Monroe, North Carolina to be exact. And she really sets a model, an example for what it looks like to use armed self-defense in the face of the Klan, in the face of state violence, and how to protect your loved ones, your community, and your kin.
After this short break, we get a better grasp of her story of one particular badass woman and her guns. Don't go anywhere.
Curious about next-gen men? We're a small part of a much larger movement to undefine masculinity for a brighter future. Our mission is clear: empower the next generation to use their curiosity, empathy, and courage to build a more equitable world. Join the Next Gen Men community as we learn and unlearn together. We're here to support boys and men to break free from limiting stereotypes. We're not just an organization, we're a catalyst for reimagining masculinity and fostering inclusivity. We're here to help open up possibilities for what men and boys can be. Explore the world of Next Gen Men at nextgenmen.ca and join the community to make a difference. Next Gen Men, shaping tomorrow's leaders one step at a time. Join us and help undefine masculinity and empower the next generation of men to lead with empathy and courage.
Samantha.
Yes, Remoy?
Look, I have a surprise for you today.
Oh, must be that long overdue wedding gift you owe me.
Oh, the gift I call friendship? Huh?
Is there a bow? Where's the glitter?
Okay. Well, actually, see, friendship, love. My smile? No?
Oh, so he's smiling, audience. And I mean, is that really a gift, though?
I mean, it's few and far between, so scarcity's got to mean something.
I mean, fair. Okay, but really, though, where's the gift at?
Well, I actually have a really special gift for you today, but it's going to be on your screen shortly, okay? Ready?
Okay.
Get ready for it.
Oh, okay. I accept. That's a great gift. Wow.
Can you describe what you're seeing?
It's a book cover. It says "We Refuse" in big white letters. And it's this gorgeous woman holding a gun like she is not going to shoot you, but she will if you try her.
Right.
And the author of this book that's who I'm seeing on the other part of my screen here today, Professor Kellie Carter Jackson. Thank you so much for being here. Honestly, that may be one of the most provocative book covers I've ever seen in like the best possible way.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving the book cover some love. It's a beautiful piece of art created by Taha Clayton. He's a Brooklyn-based artist. And it's actually called Soldier of Love. And it's a ginormous portrait. It's probably like 7 feet tall. It's massive.
Yeah, but for real, it's one of the toughest covers I've seen. But honestly, like, we have to talk about it. Have you gotten any like pushback on it being kind of like the current status quo of gun violence in, our US of A?
Shockingly, I have not. Like, I have gotten a lot of love. Matter of fact, that's one of the things that people want to talk about the most, but I think it's gripping. I think people see this woman and they feel like they know her. I felt like that. She resonated with me. She's gorgeous. But it's also like, if you look carefully, there's like laundry hanging in the background and she's in this beautiful like field. And it seems like she's very much in a protective stance. Like, I've got other stuff to do. I'm doing this laundry. I'm taking care of house and home. But if anybody runs up on me, like, be careful. And so I love that.
Yeah, I love the subtlety of I don't know if it's subtle necessarily, but it's like she's not really pointing the gun at anybody, right? She just has it just in case. Like, she's living her life, but...
Yeah, it's pointed down.
Yeah, it's just in case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that you say that, I don't think I noticed that. But yeah, she's definitely not pointing it at anybody.
And she's not threatening, so yeah.
No, I don't think it's threatening at all. I've only had, at least to my face, one person say to me, "Oh, I don't know if I'm going to get this book because I don't like guns and I don't support this." And I was like, "That's okay. That's fair. I respect it." And then I gave a talk, and after the talk was over, she said, "Actually, I really appreciate everything you had to say, and I'm buying 2 copies."
Yeah.
I said,
yeah.
I was like, "Okay, so content matters too. Let's get beyond the cover."
That's facts.
I do think we have a very complicated relationship with guns, and I completely understand why someone might be turned off, but there's a larger conversation to be had, and that conversation matters.
Yeah.
I think that's why we're here today, is to kind of entertain that conversation. But I love how you read that photo, Samantha. That wasn't bad,
I mean, I'm glad that you're finally acknowledging my own literati status.
Samantha, the photo reader, the book cover reader. Well, actually, there's another photo that I want you to read, and I'd love to for you to share what you see on the screen. Okay, give me a second to share this.
Oh, it's like a black and white photo of a black couple. They look like they mean business. They're holding guns. It's very Bonnie and Clyde. Like, they have the same stance, right? They're like kind of mirroring. They have the same stance, and they're facing forward, and they're ready. They're also not pointing their gun at people. Their gun is actually pointing up. But they're like ready just in case things pop off.
Do you happen to know who this couple is?
So they look familiar. Like, I feel like I might even have seen this exact picture before, but I feel like it was in some sort of historic context. And unfortunately, I don't remember their names.
Samantha just loves her history. No, this is Robert and Mabel Williams. Actually,
okay.
Kellie, Professor Carter Jackson, who are the Williamses, generally speaking?
I mean, the Williams are, I would say, like civil rights fam, civil rights royalty. Like, when I think of them, I kind of think of them as some of the maybe unsung heroes. They're not quite household names, depending on where you live or where you're from. But Robert Williams was the president of the NAACP for his chapter in Monroe, North Carolina. And him and his wife, Mabel, made a serious presence, we should say, in their community. They believed in armed self-defense. And this is during a time when we're still sort of at I would say, the height of the civil rights movement in some ways, where people are really pushing ideas about nonviolence and civil disobedience and sort of turning the other cheek. And the Williamses are like, oh, heck no, not in the face of the Klan, not in the face of imminent death. And they really stand up and they make a fight that I think not a lot of people are familiar with, but it's a fight that made such a huge difference in their town, in their community, and I would say in the nation as a whole.
Yeah, and exactly. So specifically, Mabel, she was born in the early 1930s, I think 1931, I believe, grew up in North Carolina around guns. Her father, he slept with a pistol under his pillow, which she helped care for.
So I think I know the reason, but why don't we tell the audience why he slept with a gun under his pillow?
Yeah, that context is key is in this time. Kellie, help us out.
Yeah, so this is Mabel's stepfather, and Mabel's stepfather had been perpetually plagued by the Klan. The Klan often made threats of attacks, the ways that they wanted to harm him, I should say, and he did not feel safe unless he had a gun underneath his pillow. He thought that the Klan would attack his home. Oftentimes, the Klan made good on their threats, and they would do these sort of night rides where they would go into Black communities and they would shoot up Black homes. They would sometimes drag people out of their homes to beat them. There were constant threats, and no one could take those threats lightly. And so the fact that he slept with a pistol under his pillow let you know that he needed to be ready at any time, specifically at night when Klansmen were likely to terrorize Black communities.
Yeah, and you talk about this in the book about like the need for force, but this force, at least, part and parcel in some capacity, is protection, right?
Oh, absolutely, it's protection. Absolutely. And I think Mabel is learning at a very young age what this protection means and what it looks like. She's responsible for making up her parents' bed every day. So when she goes in the morning and she's, straightening out the sheets and fluffing the pillows, she sees the pistol and has to sort of take the pistol and put it back in the laundry cabinet or wherever it was kept, until they got ready for bed. But this was a daily routine that was very much a part of Mabel's life. I think even before she probably had sort of language to understand what was happening, she knew that there were threats and that they needed to protect themselves. And so she grew up around guns. She was not timid or intimidated by their presence. And I think she had a deep respect for guns because she understood how important it was for their own safety.
Mabel also, though, was, it's protection, but she was a strong proponent of that nonviolent tactics wouldn't work, right? How do we make sense of that?
She thought nonviolence was suicide. Mm-hmm. There's a great book by Charles Cobb called This Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed. And I think that resonated with a lot of Southerners. It's actually a direct quote from a Southerner where she's like, here, take a gun. This nonviolent stuff will get you killed. For people who believe that nonviolence meant not fighting back, like you sort of are just an innocent lamb. You have to lay there. You have to take it. You cannot, retaliate. You cannot protect or defend yourself. I think that ran counter to how a lot of African Americans felt. They believed in civil disobedience. They believed in protest. But if someone came for them, if someone was attacking them, if someone was trying to harm their body, it made no sense not to be able to defend yourself. And I think people are also shocked to learn that, even MLK, even Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had guns all in his home. His house was an arsenal. His house had been firebombed before. It had been attacked before. There's a story he tells where there was someone in his living room who went to go sit on a chair, and he was like, whoa, don't sit on that chair. There's a ton of guns underneath that chair. Which means that he too had to grab guns from any location in his house in case things, popped off. He was a father of 4 children, and people were fierce protectors of their families and did not see that as irreconcilable with their beliefs in nonviolence too.
There's a key moment that's about to come into Mabel's history. It's actually called a kissing case. That it's developed. It's one particular moment in 1958 in Monroe, North Carolina.
This case is just a horrific case. I think about it, and it's upsetting to talk about because I have children and, my son is 10 and my daughters are 7 and 4. And I think about their innocence as children. And so to give context into what happens in the kissing case, it's 1958. And a lot of women, and this is all throughout the South, 90% of Black women worked as domestic servants, that they worked in white people's homes, cleaning, cooking, housekeeping, doing all of the domestic work. And that oftentimes during the summer months when their children weren't in school and they had no place for them, they had no place to put them in daycare, sometimes they would bring their children with them to either help them while they cleaned homes or to either play with other white children while they tended to the household. And in this particular incident, there are 2 young boys, James Thompson and David Simpson. They're 9 and 7, and they are playing with a little white girl while their grandmother is tending to the home. And in it, this little white girl who's named Sissy, she's probably 7 or 8 years old, they start to play games as little kids play games and get a little mischievous. And one of, the girl sort of plays this game where she kisses the little boy. She kisses them on the cheek. Or it's insinuated that they kiss her on the cheek. Either way, there's kissing that happens. And it is innocent and playful and harmless. But when the white child informs her mother that they were playing and that they were kissing, the mother is appalled. And not only is she appalled, she becomes so outraged that she accuses this 9 and 7-year-old boy of rape, of trying to sexually assault their child. And these boys are dragged up from their homes. They're arrested. They're thrown into jail. They're beaten. They are deprived the ability to see their parents, to see an adult that will care for them, to meet with a lawyer. And this goes on for weeks where the parents are not allowed to see their children, not allowed to intervene. They're told that they're going to be sentenced to life, that they're going to go to, like a reform school for boys. They have to meet with a psychologist, and the psychologist is telling them, you should be castrated. You should be violently harmed. And I cannot imagine if you are a 7 or a 9-year-old boy and you have no idea why you are in this position. You have no idea why you're being beaten and isolated and tortured. And all you want is your mother. All you want is protection. How terrifying that is for these boys. It was horrific.
Well, I actually found a video of those 2 boys, now men, who like in 1993, 3 decades after that horrific incident, shared with Oprah on her talk show about what happened to them when they were kids.
And as darkness, began to set in, some of the kids went home. Mm-hmm. And one of the little white boys was left and 2 of the little white girls, and David and myself. So the little white boy suggested that the little girl give us a kiss before they go home. Mm-hmm. And so the little girl gave us a little peck on the jaw. She kissed him first, and she kissed me. And I mean, being little innocent kids, we didn't think nothing of it. Mm-hmm. We just went home. What happened is the police car spotted us, and they came and they ran up on us. They had their guns drawn, and they put us under arrest. They put us in handcuffs, and they called us little boys, little rapists, and they hit my head on the cars. They was shoving me in the car. They took us down to the police station. They made us strip off our clothes.
What did you think was going on?
I was afraid. I was terrified. Mm-hmm. I was afraid for my life.
My goodness, these grown men have this stain of trauma that they will never forget for the rest of their lives, all because a little white girl thought it would be cute to give them a kiss on the cheek goodbye. And it's the irrationality of these white men that could look at 2 little children and see them as predators and see them as almost violent adults, and to deprive them of to strip them naked, to hit their head up against the side of the car. I mean, the kind of violence that they are enacting on them is the kinds of things that we reserve for people who we think are, like terrorists and the worst of the worst.
These were 8-year-olds. Yeah. They were 8-year-old, 8 and 10-year-olds.
Yeah, these are children.
And they did nothing wrong. They literally did nothing wrong.
they did nothing wrong, and they were encouraged by the white boys to kiss the girl too. And like, there's no repercussion for that white kid that kind of incited that. Yeah. So, I mean,
well, and I want to go back to the video. Like, there's such concrete details to how this further affects not only the boys, but the family and their community. And it's just incredibly upsetting. So I'm going to share another clip, and you guys are going to tell me what this elicits in you.
You know, our house had been shot up. My mother had swept bullets off the porch every day. Our families had been forced to get out of town. They kicked our families out of town. When we got out of training school after 5 months and 3 days, they had moved us in a project called Double Oaks in Charlotte. They had placed our families on welfare. They had assigned us to Double Oaks Elementary School. And they had
So your mother wasn't allowed to work anymore?
No.
Your grandmother wasn't allowed to work anymore?
No, my mother did domestic work in Monroe during that time. And after she moved to Charlotte, she didn't know anybody, so they placed our families on welfare.
I don't know if a lot of people still realize this because, you know, at the time, if you were a black person, particularly in the South, the only job you could get was menial labor or domestic work.
Right.
And that domestic work or menial labor really depended upon the good graces of white people. So if they didn't like you, you couldn't get a job.
That's right.
Yeah. So after this happened, your mom wasn't able to get a job.
Right.
I mean, obviously it's sad. It's awful, but it's destabilizing.
Mm-hmm. There's certainly no reparations. I can tell you that. I mean, for these boys that endured what they did, I mean, their family is essentially exiled. I mean, they are
Doing nothing wrong.
For doing absolutely nothing.
For doing nothing wrong. And if you ever grew up in a small town or come from an area where, I mean, Monroe only has 12,000 people. Most of the people in that town are your relatives. Most of the people in that town have lived there since the age of slavery, since slavery. And so to be exiled from that community, to go 200 or 300 miles north, west, south, whatever, to Charlotte, where you know no one, where there's no community that will care for you, that can look out for you, that can sort of make you a part of a larger village. It's extremely isolating. And then to be on welfare is even more demeaning because you weren't allowed the ability to work. It wasn't that you were incapable of working, that you were denied the ability to earn a wage, to earn a dollar, to have dignity. All of that is taken away. And then I think the other piece he says where he's like, you know, my mother every day would sweep bullets off the porch. That's like living in a war zone. We can't imagine waking up every morning to sweep bullet casings off our porch. That means you're getting no sleep at night. Because how? How are you sleeping through that?
Yeah, and on this front, this is like where Mabel and Robert really step into the fore. Like they're not going to sit back idly.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Samantha, any guesses like what their response was?
Well, I mean, honestly, based on the picture, it seems like they probably are trying to mobilize the community at this point for defense or even maybe retaliation, just like making a statement that like, you will not be treating us this way going forward.
You're totally right. So as Kellie pointed to, those bullets landing on front porches, the Klan, the local authorities, they escalated their terror, emphasis on terror, on the Black community in Monroe after what transpired in the kissing case.
Yeah, wow.
So like you said, Samantha, they decided to mobilize by starting a rifle club. Yes, a rifle club for their community.
One that like 60 members joined. People were like, sign me up.
In fact, Robert, he applied to the NRA for a charter and he got it.
Like, I don't know what it is about this country and guns, because it's like, even with all the racism, they were still like, you know what, Black man, you can have your gun. Have your gun. Your wifey, have your guns. I mean, I'm not mad at it. It's just so interesting that, like, no matter what, they're like, no, you can have a gun. That's fine. That's part of the American fabric of life. Like, what?
It's money. I mean, they know, like, one, these memberships aren't free. You're paying for that. So there's money for them. Back then, you know, the NRA was just happy to have another member on the rolls. And I don't think they were checking for, like, what areas, what zip codes, who's doing what. And I think that's part of the reason that they, you know, were able to get this charter and to really grow their numbers so significantly.
Here's maybe a surprising quote from Mabel about who started participating in that group. Quote, "We had several of our ladies become members of the rifle club, and we started training, all for the protection of our homes and ourselves when the Klan and other rabble-rousers decided that they wanted to come in and invade our homes and our neighborhoods."
I mean, that's what you got to do, you know?
You documented in your book, Kellie, I think that Mabel would brandish a gun, like to the extent of to prevent police officers from invading her home. If the police didn't have a valid warrant, they weren't coming in. Is that correct?
Yeah. I love that. And that is what I mean by like information is power. When you know the law, when you can use the law to work for you, because oftentimes the law is weaponized against Black people so much, particularly because of the way that we view Black criminality. So to be able to say to the police, like, oh, you don't have an warrant? You're not coming in here, like, and to brandish your gun as a way of saying, you will not intimidate me. I am not afraid of you. And if you come into my home, I am also within my right to stand my ground. Police officers didn't want that smoke, even if I'm sure they could manipulate the laws to make it seem as though she attacked them, whatever. They were not willing to risk their own bodily harm. And that, I think, is what's most important.
That's a good point, because you did mention something about like a cowardly way of acting once people actually on the other side actually have guns. I feel like that really tracks. I'm assuming that the tensions in Monroe continue to just escalate.
Yeah, there's one really specific instance about Black families standing up for their kids, and that was like in regards to swimming pools, actually.
Yeah. The swimming pools is a big deal in the South when it's hot in the summertime. And there were actually a lot of drownings because Black kids would seek spaces to cool themselves off, and they would go to watering holes, or they would go to places that were not monitored or not safe without lifeguards, and they were drowning. And so the pool was a protected place where you could go, where there would be lifeguards, where you could swim in a community of other people, and you could cool off from the summer heat.
So then is Mabel Williams related to this? Did she have something going on with the swimming pools as well?
Yeah, it's good questions. So the Williamses and the NAACP began protesting segregated swimming pools and even trying to work with the local government to give pool access to Black kids. Actually, there's an oral history that Mabel participated in where she shares what her husband, Robert, asked local officials. Let's take a listen.
He asked, could you build a pool in our neighborhood? That's what they asked. Separate but equal, right? Didn't even have to be equal. We're just asking for a separate pool. Right. No, can't do that. City Council, City Recreation Department, we can't do that. We don't have the money. Then they went back and asked, well, if you don't have the money to build a pool in our neighborhood, could you set aside some time when our kids can use a pool that you have? Because after all, it was built with federal funds, and it is tax supported by the Recreation Committee of the city. And after all, Black people do pay taxes. And they couldn't do that. And that's when they brought up the fact that they'd have to drain the pool and wash it out every time.
Yeah. I think about the fact that white people's beliefs about Blackness were so deep that they could not imagine Black children swimming in the same water that white children swim in, or white children swimming in the same water that Black. The idea that you have to drain the pool and then dump in new water, water that's not contaminated by Blackness, is absurd.
No, the Williamses specifically, they weren't going to stand by idly as the pushback around this grew in Monroe. There's another documented quote I'd love to share from Mabel about this experience. She's talking about how she and her husband Robert approached this situation. And Samantha, I've got it for you highlighted. I'd love for you to read it.
The powers that be were much more threatened by that gun than they were by the nonviolent protests he organized. Once they couldn't do violence and be immune to violence, they didn't do as much violence.
What is that bringing up for you, Samantha?
So Robert, Mabel's husband, he had been kind of organizing these nonviolent protests, right? But Mabel was the one who was kind of we need some guns.
There's another really evocative kind of telling quote from Mabel about how she was willing to put almost everything on the line. I'm just going to read it real quick. She says, "My feelings then were that if I must die, I'm going to take them with me. And so I got my gun in my hand and I determined I was going to kill." And to the fact that she may have been referencing the chief of police, is that right, Kellie, more or less?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That quote to me, man, so powerful. And the fact that she's willing to put her own body on the line, I mean, I think it represents the sentiments of a lot of Black women. Going back to the book cover of the woman who's standing there protective, like, I will put my own self sort of on the front lines to protect, you know, my family members, my kin, my loved ones.
Yeah, it's like the entirety of the family caught on to this. There's like actions and protests happening against the pool segregations, and their sons wanted to participate. And like reminder, this was like how a reminder of like the story we heard earlier from the Kissing case, how boys were terrorized in this community and could be by the police and the Klan. Mm-hmm. So it's, you know, easy to see or understand that Mabel was a little hesitant to let them participate in those protests.
I get it.
I'm sure Mabel went through this, and it was her sons that were advocating, at least her oldest son advocating the most to participate. Yes. So inevitably she does relent, but, you know, as a mother does, she would be sitting nearby in her car.
Mm-hmm. With a gun.
Well, yeah, let's hear that from Mabel herself. Yeah. I got the audio pulled up.
And each time that I was there in the car, there was a gun in the car with me. I didn't pick it. I was in the car with guns. But I was not picketed.
You know, you think of, you know, when you like take your kids to the park and you're just like sitting on the bench with like, you know, your little peanut butter and jelly sandwich and your orange juice, like talking with the other moms. I mean, I don't do this, but this is what I picture moms do because I don't have any kids. But, you know, like, and you're just like talking and like watching the kids. But she's like with the gun in the car watching the kids. You know, it's like paints such an interesting picture of like what motherhood has to become. Mabel is doing that. She is the one who's doing that. And we think of like protection and violence as masculine. And it's like, this is like the most motherly thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we have a very gendered lens of violence. We see violence and defense or force as masculine. And I mean, part of the work of my book is pushing back against that and saying like, no, Black women have always been the foot soldiers. They've always been on the front lines. They've always been the protectors. And part of the reasons they've always been protectors is because they have never been protected. They have never been allowed to occupy the space of the damsel in distress. You know, they have always been seen as undeserving of protection. And so the fact that, again, Mabel knew the law. She knew that, you know, I can have a gun as long as it's not concealed. So it's on the seat of the car. It's not concealed. You know, like, and if I need it, I can get to it. And that was like, we're just going to keep watch. As long as things go okay, we're going to keep watch. And again, there are a lot of instances in which 9 times out of 10, the gun is never used. The gun is never fired, you know, but it was what the gun represented and the capability of the gun to stop violence. That was enough of a threat for everyone who was around them.
Yeah, I mean, it's through this and so much more, you know, Robert and Mabel would become, like mentioned, like these civil rights icons, heroes, really, like unflinching almost.
Yes, unflinching. Good word, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so, all right. So love Mabel, down for Mabel. I want to be Mabel. It's powerful to like, yeah, like it's really powerful to hear about somebody who's like that because I feel like if I were in that situation, I would hope, pray, wish that I would act the way that she did, right? But you know, this podcast is called Masculinity with a Hard K. So Robert probably had a role in this too.
I mean, I'm going to echo what they've always said about each other, which is that they were partners. You know, they saw each other as working in tandem. And so there are a lot of ways I think that Robert leads because patriarchy, because he was the president of their chapter, because he starts this gun club. But he's not doing any of this without the feedback, the input, the wisdom of Mabel. That's going hand in hand. I mean, it's so important for me to, like, when I talk about them, to mention Mabel, because I think that throughout, like, the scholarship, Robert gets top billing always. And I'm like, we cannot forget about what Mabel is doing. And in some ways, I think it's important to focus just on Mabel and, like, her role as a mother, because to me, the story is a little bit more interesting. They both have dynamic backgrounds in politics, but I don't know. I really appreciated seeing resistance through the lens of Mabel and her motherhood.
Actually, I have a video of Mabel talking a little bit about this. I want to share that in this, like, last video here.
I've had the question asked to me, how do you feel being in the shadows of your husband who was always out front, and people talked about him? The power structure used that, I think, to split up our movement. I said, well, hey, I feel fine. I'm fighting for my rights just like he's fighting for his. We are fighting together for the rights of our people. We have to fight together for the rights of our people. If we're going to fight behind closed doors. If we don't unite together, the men and the women, what are our children going to do? I don't care if my name ever gets out there. If we make moves forward for our children, then that's what we're all about. That's what the struggle is about. I've got to love him. I've got to love my sister. I've got to love my children. I've got to love my people in order to fight this liberation struggle. The other stuff, we can deal with that later. But the main ingredient is unity while we fight this struggle that is killing us all.
I love it, except for one part. And that's, like, the fact that she was okay not having her name out in the limelight. Like, I'm not okay with that. And maybe that's why I centered her in my book. Because I think that there is power in being able to see women in leadership roles and to push back on our traditional views of what leadership looks like. And I absolutely understand what she's saying. Like, she's like, look, at the end of the day, we need unity. At the end of the day, we're all getting our clocks cleaned by the white man. Like, absolutely right. But I think at the end of the day, we're also not just trying to overthrow white supremacy. We're also trying to overthrow patriarchy and the violence of sexism and how that has also been a detriment to our communities. And so for me, I have a different way of thinking about this now because I've benefited so much from a women's movement. I've benefited so much from the leadership of women. But in the time that which Mabel is talking, we don't have that kind of language. They're not, like, down with the patriarchy. Like, there's not that concept. Or there is, but I should say it's not widely espoused and promoted,
Yeah. I everything that you said is what I was thinking. Pretty much, like, almost word for word. And when she said, we can deal with that later, I was like, it is later.
Yeah.
We are now in later.
The time is now.
Yeah, and I appreciate, honestly, like, the story of Mabel Williams is amazing. And were there other women who were utilizing force? I want to know everything.
So many. Rosa Parks, her house was also a fortress. She talks about, like, during the Montgomery bus boycott, her kitchen table being covered in guns. Ida B. Wells talks about how the Winchester rifle should have a place of honor in every home. Fannie Lou Hamer, who says, I keep a shotgun in every corner of my house. Like, I mean, Black women have this rich history of gun ownership. But I think the reason why we don't talk about it is because Black women were never interested in bragging about that. You know, it was something that was discreet. You kept it in your pocketbook. You kept it in a place you didn't brandish it. You weren't out there toting it like, look what I got. You know, it was something that was meant to be discreet or demure, as they say. You know,
I was going to say, there's gender in there. There's gender in there. Yeah, yeah.
And I appreciate, I think I appreciate the respect that Black women had for gun ownership, but also that because they understood that the gun was so powerful, they didn't need to talk about it. You know, they didn't need to sort of like, hey, look what I have. There was no need for showmanship in that way because the gun did enough. The presence of the gun did all that work.
But yeah, about this like gun ownership as a woman, like I have so many more questions. And
well, there's so many more questions to ask, and we'll get to that in our 5 questions.
I'm definitely asking some of these questions, Remoy. Like, this is not just a you thing. This is an us thing. This is a partnership thing.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, after this break, Samantha strong-arms me into asking more questions with Professor Kellie Carter Jackson. Stay tuned.
I actually found out later by a friend that Matthew tried to kill himself after that.
What does it look like to go from a perpetrator of violence to an undaunted ally for those who are vulnerable?
So, I mean, that made me feel really guilty, and I couldn't eat anything, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't do anything. I mean, I thought I deserved what he got. That's when I started talking to you.
This is the story of Lewis, a 12-year-old who went through a remarkable transformation to become the young man he is today. It's also one of the most powerful things I've ever recorded as part of Breaking the Boy Code, a podcast centered on the inner lives of boys and what it looks like for parents and educators to raise the next generation of men. Created in collaboration with Next Gen Men Podcast Network, listen to Breaking the Boy Code podcast wherever you get podcasts.
Welcome back. So, Samantha, I know you're chomping at the bit, right?
Well, I'm not a horse, despite my love for Megan Thee Stallion Remoy, but I do have some questions to ask. Thanks.
Okay. Well, Kellie, Samantha, and myself, this is our chance to ask you 5 more questions to get deeper into these histories you've documented and more on your work, generally speaking. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
And then it's your turn. You get to take the microphone and ask Samantha 1 question of your choosing. So keep that in the back of your mind.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm very excited about this. And in the past, I've been asked questions like, why did I decide to create this podcast? Or even, what does Serena Williams mean to me? Which was an awesome question that happened during one of our sports episodes.
As you can see, you can feel free to ask her, why she also loves me so much, You don't have
It's still about the podcast. It's still about the podcast. But, Remoy's, he's I guess.
No, Samantha, I know we just talked about Mabel Williams and you got this maybe muscle intention now. And I know you're rolling with force. So in that spirit, I will be demure and you can take the first question and we'll alternate after that. How does that sound?
That sounds awesome. Do that more. Let's do that more. Sounds great.
Well then, Samantha, I'll turn it to you. Question 1.
All right. So as a society in general, we don't really talk about women's anger. And I feel like it's something that women experience, obviously, but it's something that we're kind of taught to walk away, like basically work yourself out of it. Don't dwell too much in it so that you can get back to being kind of like your lovely, demure, helpful self, right? And so I wonder, you've talked so much about like defense and protection and violence. Like, what about anger? Like, what have you found about, women resisting and like them being able to work with their anger? I mean, I think there's like an awesome Audre Lorde, or it might be Lorraine.
Yeah, Audre Lorde.
It is Audre Lorde.
Yeah, she talks about the uses of anger and how anger is information and anger is useful and it should compel us to ask questions and to say, sort of tell me more. And that for so long, Black women have really been denied their ability to be angry and have been dismissed. Oh, you're hysterical. Oh, she's outraged. She's unhinged. As though there is nothing that could compel a Black woman to be wronged, to have had some sort of injustice committed against her. So I push back hard on anger. I mean, I try not to be an angry person, but I only say that because anger is such energy. It's such an engine. But I think it has to have balance. So, I talk a lot about joy, but I also think that joy, we can't just live a life that's just joy either. We need balance. We need anger too. So I'm always trying to have a healthy mix of both. One, because I think joy keeps me healthy, but two, because I think anger keeps me motivated. Anger is the reason why I do a lot of the things that I do. It's the reason why I wrote this book. Not just anger, but frustration and grief. These are all very real, meaningful emotions and concepts that frame our perspective in life. And so I want to be able to tease that out more and give Black women the grace and the space they need to be angry, but not just to be angry, to have that anger addressed, to really deal with reparations. And when I say reparations, I'm not just talking about cut a check, but how do you repair the harm? How do you repair the harm that has been caused? How do you repair those two little boys in the kissing case? How do you do that? What does that look like? How can we create models for reparation? That's what I think about a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can I ask a question now, Samantha? Is it okay?
I mean, I guess.
Wow.
You may.
Please,
Oh,
Mr.
thank
Mr.
you.
Phillip,
Thank you. My
please.
male entitlement is, yeah, okay. No, but real talk, the book's title is titled We Refuse. So I got to know, what are these women refusing?
Well, We Refuse is doing two things. One, I was very intentional about saying we instead of I, because I think that this work is collective. You can't do this work without the community. You can't do this work without all hands on deck. So we is a big part of the title. And when I thought about refusal, in the United States, I think Black history is a history of refusal. It is a history of no, never, here's what you're not going to do. Like Black people are constantly having to show and express what is unacceptable to Black human beings, how white supremacy, how anti-Blackness is violent and harmful, and we refuse. I think refusal shows up in a lot of different ways. And I say in the book that resistance, we kind of know what resistance is. Resistance is the how, did they march? Did they protest? All of these different things. But refusal is the why. It is the why are they doing what they're doing. I think refusal explains that.
So this is a great jumping off point because you talk so much about this refusal, and it's so important for Black women's refusal throughout history, especially, to be highlighted and seen. And my question is, we're talking about community, we're talking about partnership, right? All genders coming together to kind of resist. And so my question is more around how can Black masculine people, men, support that?
I think that's a really good question. I think part of the struggle, and I don't know if it's Angela Davis or Bell Hooks that says this, so I'll have to look it up later, but and I'm paraphrasing the quote, but she basically says that Black men and white women struggle the most. And they struggle the most because they see themselves as just one thing away. Black men look at themselves, and if white malehood is the supreme sort of ideal of power, they're well, I'm a man, so I'm just one thing away, one thing away from that whiteness. And women do the same thing. White women are well, I'm white, I'm just one thing away. But Black women can't occupy that space. We're not just one thing away from whiteness or manhood or to get power. And I think that when Black men think of how they can be in partnership is to not aspire to the one thing that they quite don't have, which is like whiteness, is to think of the ways that they can align themselves more with marginalized groups and be in solidarity with them. And to say like, no, I'm not aspiring to domination. I'm aspiring to equality and to justice and to equity. And what does that look like? Sometimes it means I have to speak up in defense of. Sometimes it means I have to sit back and be quiet. Sometimes it means I have to cheerlead from the sidelines. Sometimes it means an array of different things. But I think being in close relationship and with women and seeking like what it is that they want instead of telling them what you think they should have, I think is always a good start, and not sort of assuming these dominant roles. Because I think it's very comfortable for a lot of men to come in and to lead and to take over.
What an incredible answer. I'm reading all of your books. I'm watching all of your talks. That was incredible. Like, it should be on every billboard in every city, everywhere in the country. Thank you so much.
So this will be my last question, Samantha. Just going to be humble about that. No, but Kellie, we got to do work together on the Not Past It episode, and that one was like further back in history. So like using this historical lens, like looking back into the past, but also thinking about history, it can be like hard to grasp sometimes, like how people like Harriet Tubman or Sojourner Truth fought so hard without knowing like what the outcome would be.
Mm-hmm.
Like same for Mabel Williams or like her counterpart Rosa Parks in this story. They gave up everything with no certainty. Nothing that slavery would actually be abolished or Jim Crow would end. So like, why do you think that idea should still like inspire and motivate us today, whether it's racism, patriarchy, gender, or all of the above?
Yeah, it's very much like the mountaintop speech where King's like, I may not get there with you, right? Like this idea that how do you work or fight for something that you may not live to see, that you may not get to witness or experience? I use this quote a lot, and I'm not sure if it applies, but there's this film I love called Burn, and it's came out in 1969 with Marlon Brando, and there's the lead character who is a rebel leader, a Black rebel leader, and he basically says it is better to know where to go and not know how than how to go and not know where. And basically what he's saying is like, Black people know where they're going. We're going toward liberation, going toward freedom. We don't necessarily know how to get there. We don't know when we're going to get there. We don't know what sort of method or strategy is going to be best, but we know what the goal is. And I think for people like Harriet Tubman or Sojourner Truth or Mabel Williams, like they were always clear of what the destination was. They were never clear about necessarily what would work or what's the best path to take. I'm okay with that. I think for me, it's more important to have a common shared destination. I'm okay if I don't see it because I know what it is. I know what I want. I know what it should look like and feel like. I can imagine that. And so the real fight for me is figuring out the best way to get there. And if I get to see it, well, praise God. If not, then if my children do, my children's do, it's still worth it.
Well, I guess we covered it, but one thing that I want to ask you in particular is what do you think is missing from the conversation when it comes to Black liberation?
It's a good question. There's so much. I think that part of just the way that we tell stories is problematic. I think a lot of times we shape stories and the movement and activism as these very like simplistic, reductive binaries. It's violent or it's nonviolent. It's good or it's bad. It's king or it's mix. Like we have these binaries, these dichotomies that don't serve us well, that force us to choose one or the other. It's men or it's women, right? It's white or it's Black. And none of that is useful. None of that is expansive enough to really create the we that I think of in We Refuse. Like when I think of how big that we needs to be, I feel like binaries limit us. And if Gen Z has taught me anything, it's that these binaries don't work, right? These limited choices don't allow us to work with the full range of tools. And so I would want to push back against that hard. I get it. It's very easy to do. It's very easy to show people one person or one thing or two things and make them choose. And that feels very satisfying or comfortable or easy. But this work is not easy. And we should push back against anything that pigeonholes us into this or that.
Yeah, I really resonate with that because I think that resonates with me because your point on the binary, obviously we're here talking about, trying to dispel gender expectations, right? And it feels like the binary feels like another form of domination where you've got to be one or the other. There's no gray here. We're not allowed to have gray. And so now you enter the conversation of I think about this a lot in terms of, when we talk about the Black community and we talk about LGBTQ folks and we talk about women's liberation and how if you are for Black liberation in the Black community, then there is a standard that we need to meet, and that's called the nuclear family. And anything outside of that means that you are not for the liberation and the upholding of Black people. And it's what about everybody else who is not a nuclear family that's also Black, that's also supporting the community? So it feels like another form of domination for the sake of control. I mean, control has nothing to do with liberation, right? So it's it's almost like a way to, there's a feeling that in order for people for Black folks to ascend, there should be, there's got to be a leader that's going around, smacking hands. And it's that's not...
Yes. I couldn't agree more. And then from a Western perspective, as Americans, we don't know how to operate with the collective. We saw that during the pandemic very clearly. You might wear a mask, but I'm not wearing a mask. You can get vaccinated. We don't think in terms of the group. We only think in terms of I. I refuse sounds very entitled, sounds very selfish. We refuse really forces you to have to think about who is we and who is, sort of in the collective and what's the community? What is kinship? When we talk about fam, what do we mean? And I think it's important. I think it's really important to get back to that.
It's what your book pushes back against in so many interesting and beautiful ways. You document such an array of approaches and characters, mainly women, female characters leading the way in different approaches and all of them having their successes and challenges. And it's a really special book to read. And it's been a pleasure to have you here with us today. So thank you.
Thank you. Wait, can I ask my question to Samantha? I have a question.
Oh my God, yeah, that's
Well, this is it. This is your point. Take the mic. Go.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question that people ask me all the time, and I never have a good answer for, but I always like to hear what other people say, which is, and it may sound corny.
No pressure at all.
If you could have dinner with anyone in history, they can't be alive. They have to be dead. You have to be able to conjure them back from the grave. Who are you having dinner with and why?
Oh, that's a hard one. Okay, this is going to sound weird, but I want to have dinner with Cleopatra.
Really? Okay.
Because I want her to tell me what her life is. It would be either Cleopatra or Nefertiti. I want her to tell me one of the just the old Nubian, I want them to tell me what queendom is. I want them to tell me what is it, all the stuff that you're talking about in terms of women refusing, Mabel saying my name doesn't need to be on the script. If you had put your name on the script, what would the script say type thing? I want them to tell me, I think that would be so interesting and go as far back in time as possible. What was it actually like? What were you? Yeah. I'd be so interested in that. Yeah.
No one has ever said that. So that's a really good one.
Yo, thank you. I love that question. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm cheating. I'm having a dinner party and inviting everyone.
Nice. Yes. I love
Come on.
Kellie's next book, co-authored with Samantha and Zessie Kifle, on the history of Cleopatra. No?
Yes. Oh my God.
No, but Kellie, like, what's the status of your book? Are you on tour? Can people see you at a local bookstore? Or what, maybe something to share with the audience?
I'm still touring more sporadically, I think, than I did when the book first came out. I was like in, 7 different cities in like a 10-day period. I don't want to do that again. That was way crazy. But now I'm doing a lot of podcasts, which is fun. I'm doing a trip to Dallas, a trip to San Antonio. Coming up, I'm trying to think what's my next trip. I'm going to Washington, D.C., which I've been before, but I'm going back again, planning a trip to Chicago. So yeah, I'm still giving a lot of talks, which is a lot of fun. But I'm also trying to like get my next book together. I don't know how I'm going to do it. My agent is like, I need that proposal. I need that. I was like, I don't have time. But I'm also teaching. I'm at Wellesley College. I'm teaching Introduction to the Black Experience. It's a really fun class. It's like the introductory class that we offer in Africana Studies. It's a packed class. It's one of my favorite classes to teach. And I podcast. You can catch me 3 times a week on This Day in Esoteric Political History. It's a lot. And we have a really good time there too.
Oh my God, how do you do a podcast 3 times a week? Are you Superwoman? How do you do that? That's amazing.
Okay, shameless plug. I have merch, y'all. I have merch. So if you want a We Refuse crop top, a We Refuse mug, a We Refuse hat,
Fuck yeah. Hell yeah.
I got it all. KellieCarterJackson.com/store.
Oh, my friend. Yes. Crop tops will be had.
Enjoy. You're welcome.
I love that. That's awesome. So Remoy? Wow, Remoy abandoned me. Actually, no, he hasn't. He unfortunately had to attend to a family emergency back in Texas. And you know what? This is a great time to send him some kind energy. He's not into that word, but right now, I'm sure he'll absolutely appreciate it. Now, don't you worry. The journey of uncovering curious stories about gender and patriarchy will not be stopping. And actually, in our next episode, I will be back in the driver's seat, if you will. Very exciting, I know. And I'll be guiding Remoy into this phenomenon of pick-me culture. Do you know what a pick-me is? Or do you, like Remoy, have no idea what it is? Either way, you should definitely join us because I and a very special guest will be leading Remoy and you, the audience, on the road to discovery. And pick-me culture is a lot more prevalent than we think, so we'll really get into how it perpetuates patriarchy and what we can all do to be better at challenging it. Now, there may be a little moment, little Shonda Rhimes / McDreamy throwback in there, so make sure to be there and tune in. We're so glad to be back. Honestly, it's such a fun journey to take you all through these episodes, and I know I'm incredibly grateful and honored to share that with you. All the things that we get to discover every other week, it's really a pleasure. So until the next time, and all the ones after that, I'm Samantha and Zessie Kifle. Thank you so much for listening. Ciao.
This is good. This is good. I was going to take a nap, but now I kind of feel hyped, so I'm...